Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a great conference so far. It's been a little overwhelming to kind of see the sea of people and the sea of ideas out there, but really energizing as well. I'm really excited today to introduce Mr. Takajiro Ishikawa, the CEO of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. And he and I had a chance to talk several days ago, and I think the thing that struck me, and I think we're going to have a great discussion, is that Tak is someone who has a variety of very insightful opinions across a myriad of topics. You can throw anything at him, so we have no problem filling 25 minutes. And also, he is amongst the most optimistic people, perpetually optimistic people I've talked to in recent history. So I'm really looking forward to it. But to give you a little bit of intro, Tak has a long and distinguished career at Mitsubishi Heavy, spanning long residencies both in the US and in Japan. Strong financial background from Waseda University and Harvard, which he's put to great use across the company. Most notably, he led the asset management team at Mitsubishi Heavy, which he grew to over 24 billion in AUM. In 2017, he was appointed the head of Mitsubishi Heavy Industries in America and moved across. And he's overseeing the operations that the company has across a multitude of service lines, but really at the heart of the energy transition. So welcome, Tak.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am also overwhelmed to be here. And this is, I have to admit, my first ARPA-E conference. However, I think 5 of our startups that we're investees in have gotten their initial funding from ARPA-E. So it's really an honor to be here, to be at the holy grail of American innovation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think Evelyn can now brand the holy grail of American innovation. But maybe to start with, Tak, many of us know Mitsubishi Heavy through slices, right? We see the name across construction equipment and mining equipment and so forth, but we don't really know the business totality. Can you spend a minute just describing MHI to us?
So I have to do this really quickly because we have a 150-year history, but we were the industrial revolution of Japan. After Commodore Perry from the US came to Japan and caused Japan to open its doors to the foreign world. Back then, we were still in a country where it was still the feudal system, so we didn't have industry. So the Industrial Revolution in Japan, unlike the US or the UK, it didn't start with textiles. It started with the defense industry because we had to fend off the European powers that be, or even America back then, where they were looking to colonize Japan as they did most of Southeast Asia. So the new Japanese government caused Mitsubishi to be the Industrial Revolution and bring in technology from overseas. So our whole company has a history of bringing in the best technology from overseas. Fast forward, we have become really the provider of all industrial equipment, hard tech, from power plants, both coal-fired, gas-fired, nuclear, defense industry. We're the biggest defense contractor by far in Japan. We assemble the F-35 fighters. We build the F-16 fighters. We also did the F-4 fighters. We also have a rocket launching business, which we can't compete effectively with Mr. Musk here. But we have a dominant position with the Japanese government. We launch 6 rockets a year. In addition, we have a shipbuilding business. We have a forklift business. But the exciting thing that I want to really stress about our firm here in America is that we launched a program which Paul and I will talk about. It's really a creative CVC program to take advantage of the ecosystem that's really unmatched compared to what other countries can do.
Great. Look forward to hearing about that. I think one of the things that you talked about the history of Mitsubishi, it's a company that has a rich legacy and planted in so many of the traditional industries that we take for granted today. But one thing that intrigued me is in 2021, MHI launched an ambitious mission around decarbonization. So there was a mission to fully decarbonize your value chain by 2040, and you were one of the big champions of that. One thing that always intrigued me is, change comes from within, and those of us who've kind of had past experience in large companies know how hard it is to, kind of teach an old dog new tricks. And so tell us a little about the origin of that, and what are some of the challenges of trying to make change happen, especially at that scale at a company like Mitsubishi?
Well, when we launched the program in 2021, we calculated what our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions are. Noted, Japan as a country emits about 1.25 billion tons of CO2 emissions. But our annual Scope 3 emissions is bigger than all of Japan. It's about 1.5 billion tons today. That's because of our long history of supplying industry with CO2 emitting equipment. And as you can imagine, coal-fired plants, gas-fired plants have a long life. They hardly die. So if you count all the emissions that are still being spewed by those equipment, our Scope 3 becomes big. Our Scope 1, 2, because we have a very small factory footprint, is relatively small. So it's not really a challenge for us to do Scope 1 and 2. But the reason why we said we're going to be carbon neutral on all the way up to Scope 3 by 2040, which is a very challenging target, is because unless we come up with solutions to help industry decarbonize and hopefully get that in place and have the technology available 10 years ahead of what normal people or normal countries are saying 2050 is a key target, we need to do that 10 years in advance. That's how we kind of came up with this idea of we need to be Scope 3 neutral, inclusive by 2040.
It must have been a shock to your colleagues, within the company, right, to accept that kind of an ambitious target and even to set out a roadmap. So, how do you take the first, second, third steps towards it? So what was that like?
See, the CEO who announced it, there were only a few people that knew about it because he knew that there was going to be a lot of opposition.
Right.
Because when you're a company that's making most of its money on CO2 emitting equipment or in defense, to say I'm going to be Scope 3 neutral by 2040, that's going to give a lot of heartburn to the guys that have been working all their lives designing and building CO2 emitting equipment. So that's the challenge that I do face. I'm sure it's the same with big companies like GE or Siemens who have a similar background with us, who were the industrial revolutions of each of their countries. And maybe that is one reason why GE and Siemens split up into divisions and have really gone their way. We have not thought about that because one MHI is a strength that we think we bring to the table to the rest of the world. For example, we have a technology that captures post-combustion CO2. We also have technology that burns hydrogen in our gas turbines. We also have technology that we are right now developing to create the next best hydrogen electrolyzer. So we have various sets of technology that can be a one-stop solution for industry who needs to decarbonize. We also have a steel-making equipment company that is helping the steel industry decarbonize. So we want to be the one-stop shop, go-to shop, where industry needs to decarbonize. And ladies and gentlemen, climate change is hard, and it's really hard tech. You really have to build brick and mortar and design new equipment and build that. So instead of dispersing our resources, having it under one MHI, I think is a strategy that we've elected to do.
That's a great point. So what I'm hearing from you is one of the ways to affect change is to show that these new emerging technology, whether it's carbon capture, hydrogen, and so forth, can compete and essentially point the way towards growth businesses that are every bit as important to MHI as some of the legacy business, be it power plants or equipment, that matter, right?
So as as you mentioned, because we do have a big legacy business, it's really hard for us to invent cutting-edge technology because the bigger right hand always wants to squash the new emerging technology, which is not making any money. It takes a long time. So how we use the ecosystem in America, which is really launched by how ARPA-E funds these new startups, is that America is so good at matching capital and smart entrepreneurs with capital and providing them with an opportunity to come up with great ideas, grow them, and when necessary, ARPA-E or DOE provides funding. And in the defense industry, that's been proven in the DARPA mechanism. So those ecosystems hardly exist in any other countries, coupled with the IRA, which Congress put it at a $369 billion tax incentive package. But I see that as a limitless package because it's a tax credit. As long as you file, you get the tax credit. So people are saying it could be a $1 trillion package. So there's an end game for these startups as well too, where they see all these capital lined up to help and preserve value. And also for smart entrepreneurs see, maybe I can be the next Mr. Bill Gates and see what I can do. So we rely on that ecosystem to supplement our internal R&D. So just as an example, as I said, we have 5 startup companies that have ARPA-E funding. But our cutting edge technology in carbon capture, the world's largest plant that we built in Texas, which captures point source CO2 at 5,000 tons a day, it was funded by a $190 million grant from DOE. Without that, it wouldn't have started. So those are some of the examples how government policy, entrepreneurship, really work together to create new technology and bring it to scale. And one of the things that DOE does very well with the loan office is because carbon capture or hydrogen technology is still in its, it's a proven technology, but it's still not industry-wide. So in order for the finance industry to really take a leap of faith and provide project financing, it's not there yet. So when we did our ACES project, which is the largest hydrogen project now being built in Delta, Utah, it was DOE's loan office that provided $500 million on top of the 4 equity players that put up the risk capital. That allowed us to build the world's largest hydrogen electrolyzer facility, and coupling that with the state-of-the-art gas turbine that is hydrogen enabled. That's going to start up next summer. We already have 40 electrolyzers lined up in Utah ready to be commissioned. So the scale-up efforts combined with ARPA-E, DOE, really does move the needle. There's another project that we're involved in. It's called Monolith Materials in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska. Again, they got ARPA-E money, but they also have DOE loan office money to a tune of $1 billion to scale up methane pyrolysis technology, which uses natural gas and renewable power to produce clean hydrogen, but also clean carbon black, which is really an ingredient you need for the tire industry. Carbon black used in the tire industry is really not a clean process of manufacturing, as many of you would know. But now, this technology, fueled by these incentives, will be able to provide the large tire companies who are being requested by the large OEMs to provide a clean tire solution. So that's another example of how public policy, entrepreneurship, and companies like us who are ready to take these companies to scale and to the globe can really work together.
That's really inspiring. You know, when you hear stories like that around, whether it's, you know, the green hydrogen projects or carbon capture projects, this integration of, you know, technology innovation with scale-up capital, with the right regulatory and policy environments, you know, it kind of creates this perfect storm. The question is, why isn't it happening everywhere, right? What's keeping us from accelerating this pace of scale-up?
Well, Paul, that's a long-winded question, and I have to be
Well,
careful.
we got 9 minutes. So.
Well, because these climate change technologies are not yet cheap, although there is funding from DOE, ARPA-E, to really get this commercial scale, the beneficiaries of the cleaner technology, for example, you and I, who are the end consumers, have to be prepared to face a bill that will have the additional cost of having the technology adopted and having that clean product in your household. Is the population ready for that? Will the customers of these industrial companies who they supply raw material products to, are those customers ready to pay extra for that clean product? Now, if it's clean steel and you're selling to Mercedes or BMW and that consumer is buying a $100,000 car, the incremental cost for green steel, maybe $1,000, that consumer isn't going to care. But if you're buying construction steel at $1,000 a ton, $1,000 incremental cost increase is going to kill that business. So it's really how people really understand the implications of climate change and how that's going to filter through to your pocketbook. Also, and I'll take carbon capture as an example. The IRA provides $85 a ton for carbon CO2 sequestration. That's a lot of money. They increased it from the old regime, but I think there's still a notion that the government should pay for all the capital costs up front, the operating cost, the debt service, and a return for the sponsors. That's kind of the expectation. But no program that the government has provided in climate space, including the PTC or ITC for the renewables, it doesn't do that. But because when people do the calculation for carbon capture, $85 is just not enough. So they kind of balk at doing a project. So it's really up to the consumer or the industrial manufacturer who wants to emit, but they also need to get that premium from the customers. I think those are some of the factors.
Right.
Again, it's really up to us as to how we really want this. And that'll also drive the financing community to really take a hard look at hydrogen technology or CO2 technology. I think it's safe to say, as far as we know, there has not been one FID in point source carbon capture project or hydrogen project since the RA has passed, yet. Because the financiers also are very busy with all the wind, solar, battery, solar panel projects that are really being sprung up across the country. Yeah. So these new technologies also take a toll on the time of the financiers to really get to understand and take a bite.
I hear what you're saying. From our past conversation, I understand you're a fierce kind of market-first kind of guy. We have, however, members of the audience who are friends from the DOE and other government agencies, and you said in the past, the role that the IRA and other kind of incentive-based schemes had in terms of catalyzing innovation and capital deployment. What advice would you give to our government colleagues in terms of additional things, additional ways to catalyze this, the energy transition?
Okay. And I think it's been already spoken, but the IRA is predominantly a production side incentive. There's only a few dollars made available for the user side to adopt that technology. And I think that's what it takes to really incentivize leading companies to adopt that technology. Now, having said that, there are innovative companies who we all know about who really control the world's IT industry.
Yeah.
Their cloud data centers are hungry for power. And ChatGPT is going to use probably 10 times more power than the conventional technology. And they just see that they cannot do this just with renewables. So we are having discussions with these people that how can they use a gas turbine machine, which is reliable, but have the clean features. So they are talking to us about how to do carbon capture at a big gas powered plant where they can co-locate their data centers and make that even hydrogen enabled in the future. So maybe, again, these big technology companies that America bred could be the leaders of the new technology adoption that could really take off the proliferation of CO2 technology and also the hydrogen technology. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. I think, as I talk to you and as I hear you talk about this, one of the things, given your vantage point, is being part of a multinational corporation. You've been able to see, the environment and how things work here versus in Japan versus in Europe, right? So, what do you think are the good parts about, the way the U.S. system is working and incentivizing the energy transition, and what are the differences, maybe the lessons that we can learn from other parts of the world?
Well, thank you for asking that, because whenever I look at anything, I do a comparison of what is available in Japan, what is not available in Japan, and what America has. To be honest, I can't think of anything that America does not have. Japan being a very small island nation where 70% of the land is just forest, the availability for us to place vast acres of solar or wind, very limited. And we don't have a continental shelf like the East Coast has in America. The East Coast alone can host 2,000 gigawatts of offshore wind if it has the will to do so. We don't have that luxury. So going forward, the new energy that we will still have to import will come from overseas, as it has in the last 75 years. And I think America is our most reliable partner, because America has everything. It has an industrial base. It has a stable legal regime, political system, and the currency is in dollars. So that's why swaths of Japanese companies are now coming to Texas to see what they can do to make Texas and the Gulf Coast the production base and their supply chain base for the new energy source. So there's going to be more collaboration between Japan and the US. I see that coming. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful. I think we're about out of time, but as I said in the beginning, you're amongst one of the most optimistic persons I've talked to recently. So I've certainly come away with this talk with increased optimism about the energy transition and about the U.S.'s leadership role in it. So thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me.